Therefore, video 3 of lecture 3, Oaxaca, California. In order to gain an understanding of how is it that the devil arrives to the Americas, we must go back to understand the origins of the crusading mentality that the peoples from Spain, at that time were just Castile, people from the Holy Roman Empire, come to the Americas. And the story actually has to go back farther, back into the rise of Islam. We have to understand that in Iberian history, the stories of conquer and war are part of the founding bricks of the cultures of present-day Spain. The Moors had seized the peninsula from the Christian rulers and therefore had brought to the continent of Europe scientific, mathematical, and agricultural advancements. They ruled for more than 800 years. But let's take back for a moment a history before the rise of the Prophet Muhammad. Before the rise of the Prophet Muhammad, this is a map from 526. We can see what they call the barbarian kingdoms. The kingdom of the Visigoths, the Basques, the Suebi, the kingdom of the Franks, the Burgundians, the Ostrogoths, Lombards, okay, Saxons here. You can see the diversity of the British Isles, the Danish peoples. Look who had a larger extent, the Byzantine. Byzantine with its capital in Constantinople. This would dramatically shift. Right here we have Damascus, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, still very important centers of knowledge, all of them, and worship. Things would change with what we know today historiographically as the Muslim expansion to the west. These maps tell the stories of different campaigns and different battles that took place across the land, all the way up to the main battles that presently created the borders of France and Spain. Very interestingly. Another important fact was the total control of what's known as the Emirate of Corda, who took the territory from the Visigoth kingdom. The Moorish conquest of Spain is traced to have happened in the period of 2 decades, from 711 to 732. For that reason is why I have expanded on the story of Islam in the previous lectures, in order for us to get an insight into how important it is to know this ancient historical background in order to even understand present-day rituals in the Americas, right? Now, this is also a map that shows us the famous battles of Toulouse, battles at the Tours, and reason for which I've mentioned earlier, Charles Martel becomes considered the founder of this Frankish lineage of kings. This is a map from, as I said, the early 700s, the first decades of the 700s, and this is a map from 1500s, in the eve of what was going on when the explorers and so-called troops of Cortés arrived to the Americas in the height of the Aztec and Incan empires. Now, this is very important. Here we see in purple the Islamic world at the end of the Umayyad dynasty. Okay, what we have is area conquered by Christians by 1250 and area reconquered by Christians by 1500s. As you see, finally, it is until, that's why 1492 actually is the year that in Spain they don't really celebrate that much the discoveries of the Americas as we've come to know it historically, even though that concept has been outdated, right? But they celebrate actually the reconquering of their territory from the Moorish Islamic kingdom. This is very important. Why? Because what we see today is a reenactment of the memories of the Crusades taking place as religious rituals in mystic communities. How does this happen? Well, you saw the history of the devil, so you understand how the devil came to be a character that generations after generations kept transforming, embodying different ideals of the contemporary societies that pictured the devil in different forms. Part of the story, again, goes back to understanding actually why the people of Santiago Yuxtlahuaca are so keen to celebrating the story of Saint James. Who is Saint James? Santiago. Santiago is Saint James. We will have to go a little bit into learning a little bit about the story of the reconquest of the Iberian Peninsula. That story is long, and we could take an entire semester just in that. We can summarize it with this graph of 4 maps, where from the kingdoms of Asturias, we have in the 790, where the Cordoba Emirates have total control of most of Spain, and different resistance arises with different kingdoms, among them Galicia, Asturias, Castilla, and mainly Aragon become kind of the borderline with the Cordoba Emirates. This is a map of the year 900. By 1150 we can see that Galicia, Asturias extending in what's now in Leon, Castillas and Aragon keep extending their borders south, and then here emerges Catalonia as a long bigger part. Here is kind of if you know, this is where Barcelona is. Okay, so we can see that what would be the transfer, they weren't called the Cordoba Emirates anymore, they would become the Muslims of Taifir. And look at this, they start shrinking in power until they diminish, taking the entire territory, the Kingdom of Castile, right? Leon, Galicia turns with Portugal, and these are the very important story of Portugal that maintains this autonomy, particularly in the coast, and develops probably the most important part of the mixing of the scientific and maritime knowledge of the Muslim kingdoms. Everything comes to be consolidated here in the great schools of what you might remember from your history classes as Henry the Navigator. Now, Granada is the last stronghold of the Muslims and is the territory that falls markedly in the year 1492. All this period of the reconquest is what prepares the Spanish as the major maritime power of the 1500s. The reconquest of Iberia reestablishes the territory of Iberia back to Christian kingdoms. And from people that had been subjugated by earlier rulers of Islam, the kingdom of Castilla emerges as a savior. And like this, the story of the long-lived Muslim rulers, Islamic rulers in the Iberian Peninsula would be gone. All of these stories have been recollected in one of which is the classics of Spanish literature, which is called the Poem of the Mio Cid, which is the oldest Castilian epic, and its authorship still open to debate. However, it tells the stories of this process of the reconquest from the 12th to the 13th centuries. If you're interested in the birth of kind of Spanish literature, and then later, this is one of the earlier texts. Okay? Now, the role of religion, fundamental in the battles that took place. Rightfully so, that's why we went into the importance of the fast spread of Islam, and how important the belief in religion was during the actual battles. The defeat of the Moors solidified the crusading mentality, right? This is the period when Queen Isabel committed to spreading Catholicism, and the Catholic monarchies basically purged all non-Catholics. Who were non-Catholics? Well, people that believe in Islam, and people that were also Jewish, and people that are called the Roma. You might have heard of them as the Gypsies, but the Roma, also a very important culture in diaspora all throughout Europe in this period. Many of these cultures come to the Americas disguised as Christians, particularly to gain the favor as they arrive to the Americas. Everybody kind of adhere to making themselves look Christians within their arrivals. But however, this is what made Istanbul one of the most important cosmopolitan cities for the next centuries. Now this is an image, okay, of the golden twilight, the 14th century. Okay, people from that basically wrote the history of Spain with blood, battles between Islam and the Catholic faith. Here we have one of the famous peoples of the moment, the so-called capitulation of Granada, when Muhammad XII surrenders before Ferdinand and Isabel. Kingdom of Castile celebrates this moment in 1492. All of this is relevant because this is the ideology that arrives in the Americas, right? On the one hand, we have very different phenomena occurring in the Portuguese territories from that which are the result of the great relationships that Christopher Columbus was able to get in order to get the favor from Queen Isabella. And this is a map of the 4 voyages of Columbus. I know today we are very historically aware of the non-discovery of anything, right? Because you cannot discover people that have been there for thousands of years, and therefore this still doesn't mean that we cannot appreciate a map making the trajectories of Columbus. It is very important to say, as we explore meaning, is and this is a question that we'll probably ask ourselves later in another lecture, is that why is there so much resentment towards Columbus? It's usually because it falls in our views of a romantic past that seems to view that all of the problems in the continent began with the arrival of the market trade ideas of colonization that embodied this opening of trade routes, right? And we'll leave this last video, this third video here, with an image of the return of Christopher Columbus in his audience before the King of Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Okay, tune up for video 4 in the next series.